Hey artists, today I wanted to talk to you guys about one of my favorite artists of all time, and that is Jean-Baptiste Carpeaux. Just a little background. Like many 19th century sculptors, Carpeaux was from the working class, son and grandson of stonemasons in Valenciennes. France definitely has seen some great artists in the 19th century, but as of lately, they've kind of taken a little bit of a slumber and are taking a nap when it comes to art. It seems most of the Americans, people from Holland and Italy are some of the best artists of today's time. Carpeaux also studied with a really great sculptor named François Rude. Rude, as seen here, was a really badass sculptor. Just look at this sculpture that he did. It's called La Marseille, the departure of the volunteers of 1792. You can see in this style that Carpeaux definitely took a lot of inspiration from. You could almost even think that this is a Carpeaux if you didn't realize it. Like many Frenchmen artists, he moved to Rome to find inspiration, and he studied the works of Michelangelo, Donatello, and Verrocchio. He stayed in Rome from 1854 to 1861. Carpeaux's first exhibit was in the Salon in 1853. This is his first sculpture that he did for the Salon. It's kind of a very long name, so I'm going to try and say it, but I'm going to butcher this in French. It's called La Soumission de Abd el-Kader the Emperor. Alright, so I guess it's the submission of the Abel to the Emperor. So hopefully you guys can point me in the right direction with the English translation of the sculpture, but it's a pretty badass, epic sculpture. At the time of Carpeaux, there was a lot of Academy artists, and those were the guys that were contemporaries of the Impressionists. They pretty much controlled a lot of the art of the 19th century France. And he grew tired of the Academy art and started wandering the streets of Rome. And he spent a lot of time admiring Michelangelo and the Sistine Chapel. And a very fascinating quote from Carpeaux is, quote, "When an artist feels pale and cold, he runs to Michelangelo in order to warm himself, as with the rays of the sun." When he was a student in Rome, Carpeaux made this sculpture. This was a plaster version. It's called the Napoleon Fisher Boy, and he submitted it to the French Academy. Then a couple years later, he carved the marble version, and the marble version is seen in many places, including the National Gallery here in Washington, D.C. It was purchased by Napoleon III's Empress, Eugenie, and the statue of the smiling boy was really popular, and Carpeaux created a number of reproductions and variations in marble and bronze. And by the way, that's how a lot of sculptors, including Rodin, made a lot of money, was copying these sculptures and selling them. Because once you make a sculpture, you can just make it as long as you have a mold for it. You can make it multiple times. He also made in 1861 a bust of Princess Mathilde, and this later brought him several commissions from Napoleon III. Then in 1866 he established his own atelier in order to reproduce and make works of grander scale. And then in 1866 he was awarded the Chevalier of Legion of Honor. This is the seasons turning the celestial sphere for the fountains of the observatory in the Jardin du Luxembourg. There's many of the busts available in museums because, you can recreate these quite a bit. But this is the original, and it is in Luxembourg. This is one of the headpieces from that sculpture of the celestial sphere, also called Why Be Born a Slave from 1868. It's also interesting to note that he did a lot of black person sculptures, and it's very fascinating. The human proportions are very different than the classical antique Roman proportions that a lot of artists are used to. This is La Danse, the dance, or the spirit of the dance, from 1868 for the Opera Garnier. It was being heavily criticized as being indecent. Carpeaux was commissioned by his friend Garnier to make a group based on the dance of Bacchus. And this sculpture comprised several human figures, for which Carpeaux made numerous sketches over 3 years, using actresses and dancers from the Palais Royal as models. That's a huge benefit to have like actresses and models. Carpeaux completed a final model of the full-size statue in 1868 and later was unveiled at the opera in July 1869. The unashamed nakedness of the figure situated outdoors in full public view provoked an immediate negative reaction, with some saying it would be now impossible for respectable women and girls to come to the opera. The statues were attacked on the night of 27-28 of August 1869, when black ink was thrown over the statue. The opera considered moving the statue inside, but that was opposed by the Corps de Ballet. The scandal reached such a level that Charles Gumery was commissioned to make a replacement. This issue was forgotten after the Franco-Prussian War broke out in July 1870. It's very typical when something else arises. People just completely forget what they were being upset about. Same thing with current politics. A 42-inch bronze cast reproduction of Carpeau's Genius of the Dance, which is the central figure of La Danse, was acquired by the Virginia Museum of the Fine Arts in 1983 for the museum's French galleries. Carpeau's original sculpture was then moved to the Louvre Museum in 1964 to protect it from pollution, and it was replaced on the facade of the Opera Garnier by a copy made by Jon Burns. The original was moved to the Musée d'Orsay in 1983. I find it amazing that Carpeaux is not a household name. He was probably one of the greatest sculptors that ever lived, and sculpture has got kind of a bad name because normally people don't really admire sculptors as much as they should because they're extremely important in society. Carpeaux was extremely ambitious, and even at the École, as a student, he did a lot of violations because he reproduced a lot of his salon pieces and he sold them, and that was forbidden by the École. So he learned the risks and rewards of retaining reproduction rights over his models early in his career, and as a student, his refusal to sell works to the government so that he could control the rights to it smacked of dangerous pride, a strategy that ultimately paid handsomely in commercial terms. Carpeaux provided a highly visible, radical alternative to prevailing norms for sculptors of his own generation, as well as the following one. Considered a telling barometer of his age, he and his works aroused bitter public debate. Critics accused him of shameless ambition for seeking constant public exposure. His works was considered just as aggressive. Advocates and opponents alike agreed that his architectural decorations overwhelmed their architectural frameworks. His sumptuous use of Baroque and Rococo idioms was either excoriated for plagiarism or hailed as embodying the special grandeur of modern times. With its intense expressive energy and naturalism on one hand and richly articulated surfaces and decorative quality on the other, Carpeau's work challenged assumptions about the very nature of high sculpture. Well, artists, thanks for watching. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next video.